Hey guys, Christian, and welcome to another episode of What It Needs to Do. And for this episode, I'll be talking about DC Studios' DC Universe. Now that Creature Commandos is finally out, we're finally in the new DC Universe, created by James Gunn and Peter Safran. So for this video, I'll be going through all the movies and TV shows that James Gunn announced a couple years ago for his Gods and Monsters saga, and giving my thoughts and predictions on how they all contribute to the overall DCU canon. So without further ado, let's jump in. So first up, we have Creature Commandos. I know going into it, James Gunn pretty much said this was kind of like the appetizer for the larger DCU. I know initially this was supposed to be a spin-off of the Peacemaker series, which we'll get to in a second. I think it's interesting that he actually wrote 7 episodes of the series without actually having a deal with Warner Brothers. But then after he finished, he actually got hired by DC Studios to co-lead it with Peter Safran. So I'm guessing that's why this series is kind of coming before all the rest of the DCU projects. Because going into it, there's not really too many things that kind of set up the larger DCU. It's kind of more of a self-contained story. And it's mostly kind of just continuing storylines that were left off from Peacemaker Season 1. But I know a lot of characters are supposed to appear in the rest of the DCU, especially Frank Grillo as Rick Flag Sr., who's going to be appearing in a couple of other future DCU projects, as well as some of the other characters from Creature Commandos. So I think that was pretty interesting. But yeah, to go into the show itself, overall I thought it was actually a pretty good show. Honestly, I think I liked the flashback scenes more than the actual present day scenes. I think the present day scenes were good. It's just that I really feel I got to know the characters in the flashbacks. But yeah, to talk about the actual premise itself, it's picking up pretty much right after the events of Peacemaker Season 1. And spoilers if you haven't seen that show, but if you haven't, go check it out on Max and then come back to this. But basically after the events of Peacemaker, the character Adebayo pretty much calls out everything that Amanda Waller's been doing with her missions with Project Butterfly and with Task Force X. So basically Amanda Waller isn't able to use human beings for her different missions. So instead she has to recruit monsters for the missions. And that's when we get introduced to the characters of the Bride, Weasel, Dr. Phosphorus, Nina, and G.I. Robot, all led by Rick Flag Sr., who's the father of Rick Flag Jr., who was killed during Project Starfish by Peacemaker in The Suicide Squad. So now we have the team of monsters on this mission to stop this ultimate threat, which is in the form of a character named Cersei, who is basically like a rogue Themysciran. They're also trying to protect the character of Alana Rostovic, who's leader of a country called Pokolistan. And pretty much as the show goes on, we kind of get to know the different characters, and each episode has a different flashback for the different characters. I really kind of like the non-linear storytelling where we kind of go back and forth between the present day mission and then the flashback explaining the backstory of the characters. I think that's what's really cool about James Gunn, is that he can make you care about these really oddball characters, especially since he directed the Guardians of the Galaxy trilogy. It's funny how he can make us care about a raccoon and a talking tree, and then in The Suicide Squad where he makes us care about this giant killer shark, or a person who can control rats, or a person who has dots all over their body and everything and can't control it. You know, James Gunn's just a master at just making us fall in love with these unlikely characters. That's why when I was saying earlier that I really enjoyed the flashbacks, because it really helped you get to know these characters more. I think my favorite one was the character of Weasel, you know, because he was introduced in The Suicide Squad, played by Sean Gunn, James Gunn's brother, and he's just like this random crazy humanoid weasel character, and spoiler alert, you know, dies in the first couple minutes, but then he gets resurrected at the end of the credits. So you just think that he's just like this weird kind of golem-like creature or something, you know, with no mind and everything like that. But then you get into his backstory and how you kind of form this friendship with this group of small kids, and then this kind of accident happened that ended up killing all the kids, and you know, he kind of felt all this guilt. He was kind of blamed for everything that happened, even though it was a complete accident. It wasn't even his fault. So I really enjoyed his backstory, and then I really enjoyed Nina's backstory. She's kind of like the fish woman with the helmet over her head and everything, how she was born with like her lungs outside of her body, and that she had to wear this machine over her, and how her father was just trying to protect her and have her just be as normal as possible, and then create this serum to help her out with her breathing, but then it turned her into a fish creature, and then, you know, people made fun of her even more, then she had to run away, and then, you know, the police come after her, and, you know, her father tries to protect her, but then he ends up dying in order to save her. So I thought that was really emotional as well. And of course we kind of get to the twist in the whole story, where it turns out that Cersei wasn't really the actual villain, that she's kind of predicting the future, and that how the princess is kind of involved in all that with her hidden superpowers and everything. So there's this whole mission that Task Force M has to assassinate the princess, and then Rick Flag, who's kind of formed a relationship with Elena, doesn't want to do that, so he kind of has like a quest with Frankenstein, played by David Harbour, who is actually a really funny character as well, a funny but also tragic character. You know, he has this whole backstory of him and Victor, you know, wanting to create a bride for Frankenstein, and that's when we get the character of the Bride to fall in love with Frankenstein so that he wouldn't be alone. But then the Bride actually ends up falling in love with Victor instead, so then Frankenstein becomes jealous and then kills off Victor, and then the Bride and Frankenstein get into a fight, and they get separated, and they kind of live their own lives, battling each other through the decades in order for Frankenstein to have the Bride fall in love with him, but then the Bride wants nothing to do with him, so she keeps battling him and getting away. So I thought that whole backstory was really funny. So Rick Flag and Frankenstein kind of have their own mission in order to stop Task Force M, while Frankenstein kind of has his own secret mission in order to get the Bride to fall in love with them. During Rick Flag's side quest, he is confronted by the character of Clayface, who is disguised as a professor who gives them false information about Elena to kind of throw him off the scent, and then gives the information to Waller, who gives the information to the bride. So then they're aware of Clayface's deception and that he was working with Elena the whole time. But then he gets into a fight with Clayface and then gets his back broken, so that's a little bit tragic. So he's kind of taken out of the equation a little bit, but I'm sure he'll be revived later on and then be back in future projects later down the line. I also like the character of Dr. Phosphorus as well. I thought he was really cool, played by Alan Tudyk, who's a brilliant voice performer who's been in like so many different things. Plays K2SO in Andor, also plays Washburn in Firefly, and then he's been in a bunch of different like Disney movies and everything like that. So I thought he was really cool. I really loved his backstory, how he was just this scientist who was just trying to find like different cures for things, and now he kind of gets wrapped up in the mob who tried to kind of twist his formula for their own needs, and how they threatened his wife and child, eventually killed him off. As a dad, I got really emotional with that scene. And then they try to betray Dr. Phosphorus and then try to kill him off by throwing him in that machine, but then it ends up just giving him superpowers, and then gets revenge on the mob, kills them all off, and then kind of rises up in the ranks within the mob, but then obviously he gets caught and then sent to Belroad prison. But I thought, he was a really cool character, very powerful character as well. Just didn't really expect like all the murder that he would do with his different powers and everything, and like the graphic violence with his different abilities and everything. But I thought he was really cool, fun character as well. And I'm glad that he was kind of like a good through line throughout the series for sure. And then everything kind of comes to a head at the very end, where Task Force M tries to assassinate Elena, but then Weasel kind of has his flashbacks of little kids, and Elena kind of reminds him of one of the kids that you try to protect. So everything kind of falls apart, and when Nina tries to assassinate Elena, she kind of becomes aware because she was warned by Weasel unintentionally and ends up killing Nina. So I thought that was pretty tragic. I really liked the character of Nina, so the fact that she died was like, oh, that's kind of a bummer. So, but there's a lot of sacrifice with it too. And I didn't even mention G.I. Robot. I thought he was a really cool character as well, even though he's a very simple-minded character, kind of like one-track mind kind of character. His whole backstory is that he wants to kill Nazis, and that he was a soldier during World War II with Easy Company, and that's when we actually get introduced to a character, Sergeant Rock. So then after he defeats all the Nazis during World War II, kind of doesn't feel a purpose anymore, but then he gets bought by a collector, and then he realizes that the collector is a neo-Nazi, and that when he goes to this kind of Nazi rally, he ends up killing everyone and then gets sent to prison after that. And then during the midpoint of the series, he gets killed, but then at the very end, once the mission's over, he kind of comes back in this kind of buff body. So I'm glad that they brought him back, also played by Sean Gunn as well. So even though he's kind of like a simple-minded character, I thought he had a really cool backstory, and that he's a pretty fun character as well. But then we get to the end, the bride finally confronts Elena, finally kills her, and then kind of brings an end to all that. But then the bride becomes the new face of Task Force M and gets a bunch of new recruits, including Killer Shark. So I'm glad they brought him back. I really liked his character in The Suicide Squad. So it really kind of reminded me of the end of like Avengers Age of Ultron or something, where the characters from the old team, some get sacrificed, some go away, but then they form a new team for Task Force M. So I think that could be really cool for the future of the Creature Commandos in the DC universe. But overall, I think it was like a really good show. I think it was a really good way to introduce us to the new world of the DCU, and a good way to introduce this new team into the DCU. And I'm excited for future installments with the characters, and can't wait to see what James Gunn has planned for them in the future. All right, now we move on to Superman. And this is probably my most anticipated movie in the new DCU, just based on everything that we've seen so far, as far as promotion, everything like that. It just gets me really, really excited for it. And I know that James Gunn is going to do a really good job, since everything's kind of hinging on this movie being really, really good. And so far, everything that James Gunn has touched has been amazing. So I have complete confidence that it's going to be really good. So July can't come soon enough. But just to go into the premise, this isn't going to be an origin story for Superman, which I think is a good call. We can kind of just get right into the action and see what kind of threat that Clark Kent / Superman faces. And with this story, it's supposed to be about Superman reconciling with his two different parentages, one with his Kryptonian side and his other with his human side, being raised by Ma and Pa Kent. So I think that could be really cool. And then also interacting with characters like Lois Lane in the Daily Planet. So I'm glad that they're kind of embracing more of the Clark Kent side and more of the Daily Planet side, because we didn't really get that in Man of Steel. We got like brief glimpses in Batman vs Superman, and then maybe a little bit in Man of Steel, but not really too much with him embracing his human side. It's really more of just like his alien side, which is kind of a bummer. So I'm kind of glad that they're bringing it back to kind of like the Christopher Reeve Superman, the bumbling Clark Kent and everything, balancing his identity with Superman and seeing that kind of opposition that he has within, his own identity. So I think that could be really, really cool. And I think what was really cool is that Peter Safran was describing Superman as kind of like the embodiment of truth, justice in the American way, and that he's kindness in a world where kindness is kind of old-fashioned. And I think that's kind of just what we need in the world right now. now, just kindness in general. Just this world just very like dark and divided and just conflict towards each other. So just having like a symbol like Superman brought into this new DCU and just into the world in general, I think is definitely a positive thing. So yeah, I'm really excited for this character to kind of embrace his kindness and embrace his positivity and not have to be all dark and brooding like the Zack Snyderverse, but kind of bringing this more kind of positive spin on Superman. Something that we've seen in the comics and something that we've seen in the kind of Christopher Reeve Superman. And speaking of which, I know this movie is going to be sort of based on the All-Star Superman comic run by Grant Morris and Frank Quitely. And I read up on that story, and I know that James Gunn isn't going to take specific references to that storyline because in that story, Superman's greatest challenge is that he's facing the threat of death. He gets into an altercation with Lex Luthor and gets overexposed to the sun's rays, so the sun's rays start killing him in a way, and he wants his final act to be kind of like a spin on the 12 trials of Hercules, so this is like the 12 trials of Superman, in order to feel like he's fully fulfilled before, eventually dying. So I'm pretty sure they're not going to go that way with this movie of Superman, but I think James Gunn was really just trying to emulate the tone of that story and, kind of like more of like the positivity and, like the cheesiness, but kind of embracing it in a way. So I think that could be really fun for sure. And back in November of 2022, it was revealed that James Gunn was already writing a Superman movie, and I'm sure he was probably writing a Superman movie for the DCEU, which is probably going to be like a sequel to Man of Steel that we were supposed to get like way back in the day, but yeah, it just never really happened. But I'm sure like once he actually got hired to be the new head of DC Studios and kind of form the new DCU, kind of rewrote it in a way in order to be kind of like the launching point of the new DCU. So Henry Cavill was not asked to return, and he kind of wiped the slate clean of the DCEU and then used it as a launching point for the new DCU, which totally makes sense because I know he wanted to have this story be based on a younger Superman, and obviously Henry Cavill couldn't fit that bill. So yeah, it totally makes sense that Superman would be recast as a new actor, now played by David Cornsweet, which I haven't really seen anything that he's been in before, but he definitely looks the part of Superman. Just seeing him in the trailer and the promotional art, he definitely, has the straw jawline and, like the hair and everything. When it's gelled back in Superman, he has that one curl that comes down, so he definitely has that kind of like classic Clark Kent / Superman feel. So I think he'll fit the role really well. And we also have Rachel Brosnahan, who will be playing Lois Lane. And I haven't seen The Marvelous Miss Maisel, but I do have it in my queue on Amazon Prime, so hopefully I'll be able to watch that before watching the new Superman movie just to see how she is. But, based on the trailer, she definitely embodies that kind of like Margot Kidder feel from the original Superman movie and a little bit of the Amy Adams attitude from Man of Steel, so I think she could be really good for sure. And just as far as continuity, James Gunn and Peter Safran said that this is pretty much the true beginning of the DCU, which totally makes sense just because I know, like I said earlier, that Creature Commandos was really supposed to be part of the DCEU and a spinoff of Peacemaker, but then after James Gunn and Peter Safran got hired to run DC Studios, he kind of reworked it to be the beginning of his new DCU. But I know, like I said earlier, that was supposed to be kind of like an appetizer for the larger DCU, and that Superman is supposed to be like the true beginning of the DCU, and that this movie is supposed to take place after the events of Creature Commandos. So I'm sure once we see Frank Grillo as Rick Flag Sr., who was confirmed to be in this movie, he'll probably be like after, he got out of the hospital, after his battle with Clayface, and I'm not sure like what capacity his role will be, but I'm sure maybe there'll be like a post-credit scene at the end where maybe he gets recruited by Rick Flag or Amanda Waller and then gets word about this kind of oncoming threat to the DCU. So I think that could be interesting. I think another interesting point is that, once again, this isn't an origin story, and that this is supposed to be like Superman, maybe like year 2 of him being Superman, and that how there's already other heroes within the DCU as well. We get Mr. Terrific, we get Hawkgirl, we get the Guy Gardner version of Green Lantern, which we see all of them in the trailer. So I think that'd be really interesting seeing how these characters kind of interact with each other. Is it going to kind of be like the Avengers, where like Avengers Phase 2, where all the heroes are already established and, they're kind of working together, but, they're also kind of like doing their own thing. So it'd be interesting how James Gunn explains all that, how we're already kind of living in a world of superheroes and how the kind of like the world interacts with them and everything. So we'll see what he does with that, but I think that could be really interesting. Not having to worry about an origin story, just have the characters just be who they are and just live in a world of superheroes. And we're also going to be introduced to a couple characters from the Authority, which we'll get to in a second. So I guess this will be like their introduction to the DCU, and then they'll kind of spin off in their own film later on. So I think that could be really interesting too. Yeah, I think overall it's just really interesting to have a new kind of superhero series with the heroes already established and not worry about how each character kind of has their origin story and how they all kind of come together and how they all kind of like spin off again and then come together again. So like I said earlier, I think it would be really interesting to see how James Gunn brings us into a world that's already established with superheroes. So I think that'd be really cool. And finally, we got got a bunch of promotional material for the movie. Back in the day, we got that first image of David Cornsweet in the new costume, putting on the boot, and then in the background we see like kind of like alien jellyfish thing shooting a laser in the background. So just to show like his different parts of his costume and how each different part of his costume is kind of taking inspiration from different comic books. So I think it's really cool. He kind of has the collar, he has the gold S emblem on his cape, he has the trunks again, so which I don't really care for, but I actually kind of prefer the Man of Steel version where he's kind of like trunkless and it's just kind of like the blue leotard all the way through. But I know, again, James Gunn's trying to embrace the cheesiness of it all, and he was trying to show that Superman didn't want the people of Metropolis and the world to be afraid of him, so he kind of had to embrace all the cheesiness. And kind of, I guess, speaking of cheesiness, we have the character of Krypto the Superdog. We got another reveal of that. It's for like an adopt a pet day or something, and it shows like Superman and Krypto next to each other looking down at the planets and everything. So I think that'd be really cool. Like at first, I didn't really care for Krypto that much. I remember watching the cartoon like Krypto the Superdog and not really taking it super seriously and everything. But again, James Gunn trying to embrace the cheesiness of it all and like try to make it grounded and serious. So I was kind of like, okay, I guess I'll go along with it. We'll see how it goes. But then eventually we got that motion poster of Superman flying up, and then we get the catchphrase saying "look up." So I think that'd be really cool. Embracing the whole kind of like, look up in the sky, it's a bird, it's a plane, it's Superman. And then also obviously look up as in gotta be positive, like look up, there's hope out there. I think that was really cool for sure. And then with the kind of slowed down John Williams theme from the original Superman back in 1978, thought that was really cool. And then finally we got the new trailer, which is, oh my goodness, that was like literally one of the best trailers I've seen in my entire life. And it's kind of like the reason why this is like my most anticipated film of 2025. I know there's a lot of Marvel movies out there that are coming out too, and other movies that I'm excited for, but this trailer just made this movie just go at the top of my list for sure. So just starting off, in the snow, and you see like the wind blowing it, and you don't really know what's going on. It's very atmospheric, and then suddenly Superman crashing down into the snow, and then kind of like all like crumbled up and everything, beaten up, scratched up, scarred, and then we hear the just him breathing and everything like that. And then we kind of get flashes of him as Clark Kent, which I thought was really fun, seeing the mushroom hair and the glasses and the large suit and everything that doesn't really fit him, and kind of going through the crowd and bumbling through and going like, oh, I'm sorry, and going to the Daily Planet. Thought it was really cool. Yeah, and just showing like different clips of him as Clark Kent, not only in the Daily Planet but also just like in Kansas with Pa Kent. And people were theorizing like, oh, is Ma Kent the one that dies? And then it's really just like him and Pa Kent who are by themselves in Kansas. So I think that could be a really interesting theory. And then we kind of just get right into it, like from James Gunn. The title card, we get the cool music, kind of like the slowed down version of the Superman theme on the guitar, very Top Gun Maverick kind of like score to it. Cut back to Superman in the snow, he whistles, and then we see this giant bloom of snow kind of ruffling, and then people are wondering like, who is that? It's gonna be a Supergirl or something. And then suddenly we see Krypto the Superdog come in, and at first I was kind of like, oh, but then once you see that cute little face and Superman putting up his cape and saying, home, take me home, and then Krypto putting his mouth and dragging him across the snow, I was like, okay, I'm embracing this character. I really love Krypto, and I know James Gunn is a huge dog advocate. He has a couple dogs himself, so he's gonna put a lot of love into this character and make his character. We saw Cosmo the Cosmonaut dog in Guardians of the Galaxy movies, so of course he's gonna have a dog in this one and have us care about it, so I thought that was really cool. But yeah, then we just get into like all the different action shots. We get into like Superman saving people, which is something that we kind of miss from the Man of Steel movies, is like Superman directly saving people. We see the kaiju coming down and like those barrels exploding everywhere, and then him kind of embracing the girl, trying to save her from all the debris. The fact that we got a giant kaiju monster in this movie is pretty crazy, so that's gonna be fun to see. We see the different heroes that are helping out, Hawk Girl, Mr. Terrific, Guy Gardner. We see Superman kind of like walking through the crowd, and people like either hating him or loving him. People were hating him, like throwing cans to the back of his head, and him kind of just looking very just somber and just like what did I just do? So interesting to see like what is the reason for all that. Obviously we see people who love him. You see the little boy during that crowded chaos scene, him like planting the flag and putting it up that has the Superman symbol flying in the breeze, and going like, Superman. Like I got kind of teary-eyed at that because again, just as a dad watching that, I just got emotional. I just was thinking about my own son, trying to be like a hero to him, and maybe him watching these movies and finding inspiration in Superman. I thought that was really cool. But yeah, we just get like different like touch of action and everything. We get Lex Luthor, played by Nicholas Hoult, who looks really cool with his shaved head, looking all jealous of Superman and everything, you know, with his gun, probably with a kryptonite bullet in it or something, you know, looking like a James Bond villain. We obviously get more shots of Lois Lane, her and Clark Kent's budding romance. Looks really cool. But yeah, just like overall the trailer is just really good, really emotional, action-packed, colorful, just look very positive and everything. All the theories are going on of like what's going to happen in this story, and the music of course was really amazing as well. But yeah, it just gets me more excited about this movie, and yeah, it just gives me hope for the DCU, and I'm sure with James Gunn at the helm, it's going to be really, really cool. But yeah, overall, great trailer, and yeah, I'm excited to see what happens with the future of the DCU and how Superman is kind of like at the helm to kind of get us started within it. So yeah, I'm really excited for it for sure. All right, now we move on to Peacemaker Season 2. And yeah, I'm actually really excited for Peacemaker Season 2. Before making this video, I pretty much binge watched all of Season 1, and I really, really enjoyed it. You know, it's very like dark and violent and, you know, very adult, but I think overall it was like really entertaining. You know, I love the characters. I love the character of Peacemaker, Christopher Smith, played by John Cena. I thought he was really cool, and I thought he had a really cool arc in the story. You know, he was kind of like, you know, like the joke character in The Suicide Squad. He was like, I'm going to make peace by any means possible, no matter how many men, women, and children I have to kill in order to get it. So, you know, it's kind of like this joke anti-version of Captain America kind of in a way, and they kind of embraced that. So I think that was really, really fun. But yeah, they kind of really like humanized his character. You know, they gave him a lot of backstory. You know, they showed his life before he joined Task Force X, and his father and, you know, his brother and everything, and how his father was just this horrible neo-Nazi guy who kind of pitted these two boys together, and, you know, how like they would just have these kind of like fights and everything like that, you know, and people would bet money, and then how Peacemaker accidentally killed his brother in the fight, and how he felt all that guilt and shame, and especially, you know, all that stuff that his father brought onto him, and that kind of made him who he is, and that, you know, he's always had this mission to bring peace to whatever situation he's in. And then obviously that got twisted by, you know, his father's manipulation, and how, you know, that caused him to, you know, become just a mass murderer in a way, you know, in order to embrace peace. And then obviously, you know, he got recruited by Waller and then brought into Project Starfish, and then we got everything that happened in The Suicide Squad, and, you know, that kind of sent him kind of reeling, like, who am I? What do I do? What's my identity? And this show kind of like helps him embrace who he is, kind of like gives him a new mission in life, is, you know, to protect others, you know, obviously protect the world from this alien threat that happens with Project Butterfly and all these different like butterfly alien creatures, you know, taking over these people's bodies and everything, in order to have this different mission and everything like that, in order to change society and have it kind of conform to their ways, because they see that human beings are just super flawed, which, you know, totally we are, and they think that their ways are best for us to control us and have us be, you know, a better society. And, you know, how Peacemaker kind of sees past that and, you know, kind of brings an end to it. Spoilers for everything for Peacemaker Season 1 if you haven't seen it. Again, watch it on Max. Come back and watch this, you know, by destroying the giant cow monster and destroying their sap supply. But yeah, I like how it kind of ended kind of ambiguously, like, oh, Peacemaker, did he make the right decision in killing the cow and bringing an end to Project Butterfly? But I think it's a really good ending to that story arc, and then kind of sets us up for what could possibly happen in Season 2. You know, now he's part of this new team with Adebayo and Economos and Harcourt, and obviously with Waller and Vigilante, which I thought was a really fun character too. It kind of reminded me of Deadpool, how he's kind of like this snarky character, and he's always like super sarcastic, but he doesn't really know social cues at all. But yeah, I really liked all the characters, really liked the storyline, and it really kind of set us up for what could happen in this new DCU. And back in February 2022, the second season was announced, and James Gunn was announced to write and direct all the episodes. And then in February 2023, he said that work would continue after Waller was made, since Superman was going to be his next project. And then in that October, James Gunn said that the new season of Peacemaker would take place within the new DCU continuity. But then in March of 2024, James Gunn said that Waller had been delayed because of the 2023 writers and actors strikes, and that this season of Peacemaker would actually be produced first. And then filming finally began later in 2024 after all the strikes had ended. But that was also the time that he was directing Superman, so he wasn't able to direct all the episodes, so he had to kind of give some of the episodes away to other directors so that he can focus more on Superman, which totally makes sense, since Superman is kind of like the big project that kind of sets up the entire DCU, so you kind of have to put more focus on that in order to make it good before working on any other projects. And they also had a pre-shoot in April of 2024 ahead of principal photography, which started in June of 2024 and then concluded in November of 2024. And it was announced that this new season is actually set to premiere in August of this year, so we don't really have to wait too much longer. Pretty much after Superman comes out, we just have to wait a month, and then this new season will come out. So so that'd be really cool. And that in the continuity is supposed to take place after Creature Commandos and Superman, which totally makes sense for the release order, so we don't really have to worry about things kind of being out of timeline order. We can just have the TV shows and movies come out and we can just follow the continuity that way. Also, Frank Grillo is confirmed to return for this season of Peacemaker, which will be interesting to see how he interacts with Peacemaker, especially since Peacemaker is responsible for the death of his son. So it'll be interesting to see how those two characters interact, and hopefully by this point Peacemaker would be kind of more apologetic for his previous actions, and hopefully he'll be more humble towards Rick Flag Sr. and try to ask for his forgiveness, and hopefully the two will finally, form a bond. I'm sure there'll be conflict earlier in the season, and then as the show goes on, they'll learn to trust each other and then face whatever threat they're going to be facing in the new season. But overall, yeah, I'm really excited for Peacemaker season 2. I was definitely not expecting to enjoy Peacemaker season 1 as much as I did, and it'd be interesting to see how season 2 kind of factors into this new DCU continuity, because it didn't really have too much to do with the DCEU. I know there was kind of references here and there to characters and events, but James Gunn was saying that there's supposed to be kind of a rough memory of what happened in the DCEU, but it's really just going to be its own new story, which totally makes sense, because again, there wasn't really too many things from the larger DCEU that could kind of impede on this new version of the DCU. So I'm sure James Gunn will have his own separate story, and we'll see how it kind of connects to the overall DCU, and how it kind of sets up events for future threats that the heroes will be facing later on. So yeah, overall I'm really excited for season 2, and yeah, can't wait to see what happens with it. All right, now we move on to Waller, and the official premise for this show is that it's supposed to continue the story of Amanda Waller and Team Peacemaker. So I'm pretty sure it's going to follow Amanda Waller dealing with the fact that her daughter Adebayo kind of exposed her for everything that happened with Task Force X and with Project Butterfly, and hopefully she'll try to find some kind of humbleness with the other heroes and try not to control them for her own selfish means, but try to embrace them as heroes and how they're trying to make way for themselves in this kind of new DCU and possible threats that could be coming up in the future. So I think that would be really interesting to see for her. And in May of 2022, Peacemaker's spinoff series was revealed to be centering around Amanda Waller, with Crystal Henry serving as head writer and showrunner along with Peter Safran and James Gunn. And when James Gunn and Peter Safran revealed the new DC slate in 2023, the second project was Waller, which James Gunn said would be a continuation of the Peacemaker series, because the second season of Peacemaker was delayed due to him focusing on the rest of the DCU, and that Crystal Henry was confirmed to be a co-showrunner with Jeremy Carver, and that Viola Davis was confirmed to be reprising her role as Amanda Waller. And like I was saying earlier, this show is actually scheduled to be kind of an appetizer for the rest of the DCU, but it was delayed due to the writers and actors strike in 2023 and is now set to release after Peacemaker season 2. And other actors from the Peacemaker series are confirmed to be in this show, including Steve Agee as John Economos, which totally makes sense because he's kind of one of Waller's right-hand man. He was in The Suicide Squad, he was in Peacemaker, and he was in Creature Commandos. So it'd be cool to see his dynamic with Waller, and hopefully we'll see Harcourt and Adebayo and maybe see even Vigilante in there as well. But yeah, overall I'm really excited about this show. I think the character of Amanda Waller has been really cool, seeing her way back in the day in Suicide Squad back in 2016, and then seeing her character evolved in The Suicide Squad and Peacemaker and Creature Commandos, and it'd be cool to see her own kind of series and see how her character kind of evolves to being kind of this very selfish character who's only in it for herself to kind of being more of this humble character who actually cares about other people, and see how she kind of helps kind of shape the new DCU. So yeah, I'm actually really excited to see it for sure. All right, now we move on to Supergirl Women of Tomorrow. And for this one, James Gunn pretty much described it as a big epic sci-fi film and a beautiful star-spanning tale, which actually gets me more excited for. He also described the contrast of Kara Zor-El / Supergirl's character with Clark Kent / Superman, and how Clark Kent was raised by Ma and Pa Kent in this kind of loving home and kind of interacted with all these different humans and kind of growing up to embrace human beings. But then Kara grew up on this chunk of the planet Krypton after it blew up, and also watched everyone die around her and kind of became more of a jaded character. So I think that could be really interesting. When she actually does come to Earth and visits Clark Kent, seeing that contrast between the two characters I think could be really, really fun. And this movie takes its title from the comic book series Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow by Tom King and Bilquis Evely. And in that comic, it focuses on Kara Zor-El's quest throughout space guided by Crypto. So I'm not quite sure how much James Gunn is actually going to take from that storyline, but hopefully that can be a good way of bringing Kara Zor-El into the new DCU. And maybe at the end of Superman and Crypto kind of go out to find other Kryptonian survivors, and maybe they actually find Kara Zor-El Zor-El and then bring her back to Earth. And then she kind of sees the different contrasts that she has of her growing up and not having any loving parents around her, and not really embracing the humans as well. And maybe that can be like a good setup for where this new Supergirl movie goes. But speaking of the story, in November of 2023, a writer named Anna Zagira was confirmed to be writing the screenplay. And in January of 2024, Millie Alcock was actually confirmed to be playing Supergirl. And it was reportedly revealed that she's going to be making her debut in Superman. So maybe in a post-credit scene, which I think totally makes sense because I feel like the Superman movie already has enough heroes as it is. So to have another hero introduced within the story, I think would make it a little bit too crowded. So yeah, I think there'll definitely be a post-credit scene of, kind of like I theorized earlier, of Superman and Krypto going out to space and then finding Kara Zor-El and then bring her back to Earth. So I think that would totally make sense. And then set up her movie later down the line. And then in April of 2024, Greg Gillespie was actually in talks to direct Supergirl. And then he was actually confirmed to direct the next month. And actually, as of this recording, they started filming a few days ago and will be going through till the end of May. And they'll actually be filming at Warner Brothers Studios in Leavesden and in London, England, and in Iceland. So I think that could be pretty exciting. We also got confirmation that Jason Momoa will be playing Lobo in the movie. And he previously portrayed Aquaman in the DCEU continuity, which I know we heard rumors about that before, like way back in the day, back in like October of 2022. And then we actually got that post by Jason Momoa on his social media about a month ago where he confirmed that he was playing Lobo, and then James Gunn confirmed it as well. So I think that totally makes sense just because Jason Momoa has been such a big part of the DCEU. And James Gunn and Peter Safran said that they might have actors that were previously portraying characters in the DCEU in the new DCU continuity. So it's cool that we're actually seeing that in fruition. And yeah, hopefully we'll see more actors from the DCEU in the DCU. And yeah, I think he's like a perfect casting because like he looks just so much like Lobo. I was doing research on it, and I definitely think that he can portray that kind of character, especially with the kind of like biker personality that Lobo has. I feel like Jason Momoa can pull that off perfectly. And it's supposed to be released on June 26th of 2026. So we don't have to wait too much longer for it. So I think that'd be really cool. After Superman comes out, we only have to wait less than a year to get Supergirl. So I'm glad that we don't have to wait super long. No pun intended. But yeah, overall, I'm really excited about Supergirl. I don't really know too much about her, but after reading the storyline of Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow, I think it could be a really interesting premise for a movie. I'm not sure like what the timeline's going to be. Is it going to be kind of like with Creature Commandos where it starts off in present day and then kind of goes back to different flashbacks, kind of explaining Kara Zor-El's backstory, or is it just going to be more linear where it just starts off kind of explaining Kara Zor-El's origins and how Krypton was destroyed and how she was kind of raised by herself on the kind of chunk of rock of Krypton and kind of goes on all these different adventures and becomes more of a jaded character. But either way, like I'm really excited to see what James Gunn does with it and what the writers and directors have in mind for the movie. But yeah, overall, I think it'd be really cool. And I know we had the Supergirl series back in the kind of like CW version of Supergirl, but I'm sure like this one's going to be more like hardened warrior character and kind of stays more true to the comic book storyline. And yeah, I think it'd be really exciting. So yeah, hopefully as time goes on, we'll get more set photos and teaser posters and maybe a teaser trailer so we can kind of get more excited about the project. But yeah, overall, I'm excited to see how Kara Zor-El gets brought into the DCU and what kind of conflict she has with Clark Kent and how she eventually learns to embrace her superheroism and becomes part of the DCU. All right, now we move on to Lanterns. And the official premise of the show is that it's supposed to be about Hal Jordan and Jon Stewart teaming up to investigate a mystery on Earth. So I think that'd be really cool. I know that Peter Safran was saying that this is supposed to be an Earth-based story kind of inspired by True Detective. And that's supposed to be a huge HBO quality event, which makes sense for multiple reasons since one, it's a show on Max, which was originally HBO. And then two, True Detective season 1 was an amazing story starring Matthew McConaughey and Woody Harrelson. And it's definitely like a very dark, dramatic show and like a lot of twists and turns and, very, very intense. So to see that in a DCU project with Hal Jordan and Jon Stewart, I think would be really, really cool for sure. And in December of 2022, James Gunn confirmed that the Green Lantern characters will be important to the DCU, which totally makes sense because we didn't really get a ton of them in the DCEU. Way before the Snyderverse, we got the Green Lantern movies starring Ryan Reynolds, and we already know how that turned out. So the Snyderverse was kind of afraid to bring the Green Lantern into the DCEU. I know we got a little bit of glimpses of Green Lantern characters in the Justice League Snyder Cut, but we didn't really get them fully embraced. So to have James Gunn and Peter Safran take the Green Lantern characters seriously, and especially kind of launching them into the DCU in a True Detective style story, I think is the best call for it for sure. So I'm sure we're not going to get a ton of like cheesiness from the 2011 Green Lantern movies, but we're going to have something that's like really dark and serious and, helps us embrace these characters even more. And back in 2023, when James Gunn announced the entire slate of the new DCU, he revealed that Lanterns would be one of the series and that how it was definitely something that was long in development. So I'm sure they've had this idea for a long time of how to take these characters seriously and how to bring them into this whole new DCU continuity. And at the end of May of 2024, Chris Mundy, Tom King, and Dave Lindelof actually wrote the pilot script and series Bible for Lanterns. And I think they're really good filmmakers. I know Dave Lindelof has been been kind of hit or miss with Lost, but he's done a lot of other series, like Leftovers and things like that, which have actually been really, really good. So I think the three of them will do a really good job at kind of taking Peter Safran and James Gunn's vision for the Green Lantern characters and making something really great. And Chris Mundy actually serves as a showrunner for the 8-episode series for Lanterns. And in October of 2024, Kyle Chandler was casted as Hal Jordan, and Aaron Pierre was casted as Jon Stewart. And I think that's actually perfect casting, just because they look so similar to those characters, especially Aaron Pierre. Like, I'm not too familiar with his work, but just seeing like the different screenshots of him, he like definitely looks exactly like Jon Stewart, especially the Jon Stewart from like Justice League Unlimited. He's already got like the green eyes, and he's got like the jawline, the hair and everything like that. So I think both of them could be really, really cool. I think Kyle Chandler is a fantastic actor. Everything he's been in, Friday Night Lights and so on and so forth. So I think it'd be a really cool choice to play Hal Jordan. And then Aaron Pierre, I'm sure, is going to be amazing in it as well, especially with Chris Mundy directing them and everything for this series. So yeah, I think it'd be a really cool series, and actually just gets me more and more excited for it for sure. Also, a director named James Hawes was actually confirmed to be directing the first 2 episodes of the series, as well as executive produce. And filming is actually supposed to take place from mid-February to July of 2025 in Los Angeles. And in November of 2024, James Gunn actually said that he was intending that this series be released sometime around the time that Supergirl gets released, which is scheduled for June of 2026. So that'd be cool in 2026 that we get a major motion picture with Supergirl, and then hopefully maybe like a month or two later we'll get Lanterns. Also, Peter Safran said that the mystery that Hal Jordan and Jon Stewart are investigating kind of lead into the main storyline in the DCU, so not quite sure what that'll be. Maybe it'll lead to like a Darkseid storyline, since the DCU is kind of like an equivalent to the MCU, and the big bad in the MCU is Thanos, and then Darkseid is kind of like the equivalent to Thanos, so maybe it'll lead to something with that. I'm not really quite sure what the timeline is going to be with this whole Gods and Monsters Chapter 1 and how many other chapters there'll be. So maybe it'll be like a smaller thread or something. Maybe it'll be Sinestro, Brainiac, or Doomsday or something like that, but we'll see. It just gets me more excited for what the ending of this season is going to be. We just have to wait about a year and a half or so until it gets released. So yeah, we'll have all this time to talk about like different theories and speculation and things like that. And hopefully with the trailer, we'll get hints of what the overall mystery that these two characters are going to be investigating. And then we can kind of get our theories of like what James Gunn and Peter Safran's plans are for this overall DCU and Chapter 1 Gods and Monsters. So we'll see how it goes. But yeah, overall, I'm really excited about this show. And yeah, I can't wait to see what happens with it. All right, now we move on to Clayface. When they first announced this back in December of 2024, it wasn't part of the initial run that James Gunn announced way back in 2023. And I didn't really know too much about the character, so it was kind of like a Clayface movie. Like, what are they going to do with this? But then once I actually saw him in action in Creature Commandos, it kind of built up my excitement for it. And now I can't wait for the Clayface movie, so I think it'd be really cool. And actually, this whole thing started back in March of 2023 with director Mike Flanagan and his partner from Intrepid Pictures named Trevor Macy, where they met with James Gunn and Peter Safran to talk about a possible Clayface movie, but have him not be a villain, kind of like how he's mostly portrayed in the comics. And I'm thinking that it might be based on the Johnny Williams version of Clayface from Batman Gotham Knights, where he's more of like an anti-hero in a way, and he actually becomes somewhat of a hero and tries to help Batman save the day. Also, last month in December of 2024, DC Studios actually greenlit the film based on the script written by Mike Flanagan, and Matt Reeves actually confirmed that he'd be producing the project alongside Lynn Harris from Six and Idaho Productions. And I think what's really cool about James Gunn and Peter Safran's process is that they don't force release dates on these different projects. They kind of wait for the script to be as good as possible. So if they get a pitch from a director or a writer for the DCU and they like it, they'll greenlit the project and produce it. So I think that kind of takes the pressure off these different filmmakers and everything. Like, James Gunn and Peter Safran really want to make sure that these scripts are locked down and as good as possible before going into production or having a release date, so that they don't have to worry about continuity and, like production delays and lower quality in these different films and series moving forward. That's actually something I think that's really cool that they're doing. And filming is actually expected to begin in early 2025. And the studio is actually in search for directors, since Mike Flanagan is really busy with his other projects, including an Exorcist film and a Carrie series. And I think what's also cool is that Peter Safran actually compared the tone of this movie to The Fly, which yeah, totally makes sense, especially if it's going to be centering around the character of Johnny Williams. I'm sure it's going to start off with Johnny Williams, or whatever character they decide to use, kind of experimenting with like shape-shifting abilities, and then something goes wrong, he becomes Clayface and kind of becomes a monster in a way, terrifies people. But then as the story goes on, maybe he becomes more heroic and, eventually saves the day at the end. So I think that could be really cool, kind of like a twist on the whole Fly storyline. And then finally, the film is actually supposed to be confirming to come out on September 11th of 2026. So yeah, so we don't really have to wait too long in between the releases of the different projects. We'll get Supergirl in June, and then hopefully we'll get Lantern sometime after that. And then in September, we'll get Clayface. So yeah, 2026 is going to be a big year for the DCU. And yeah, I'm excited that we don't have to wait super long in between releases. And hopefully it'll just continue the storylines that James Gunn and Peter Safran have been setting up from the beginning of the DCU. And yeah, we can just see that continuity and that storytelling unfold unfold, and we'll see what their grand plan is for the DCU. All right, now we move on to the Authority, and not gonna lie, I know nothing about the Authority. I did a little bit of research on the premise and the characters in the Authority series, and yeah, it looks really, really cool. And James Gunn described the Authority as people who think that the world is completely broken, and the only way of fixing it is by taking means into their own hands, whether that means killing people or destroying heads of state or changing the government in a way, or whatever they can do to make the world better. So it'll be interesting to see how they fit into the DCU. I know that they're supposed to make their first appearance in Superman, so I'm not sure if they're going to be kind of like antagonists in a way, and then maybe like Superman comes in and tries to show them positivity. Maybe he works together with Hawkgirl and Mr. Terrific and Green Lantern in order to kind of show them the other side of humanity, how like there's actually goodness in the world, and maybe that kind of changes the Authority's mind, and then they kind of, you know, embrace the positivity that those characters are trying to bring to the world and help to try to make the world a better place instead of destroying the negativity in it and try to reshape it in their own image in a way. And Peter Safran also compared the moral complexity of the team to Jack Nicholson's character in A Few Good Men. So yeah, I think that totally makes sense, and maybe there'll be some kind of like trial scene in the Fortress of Solitude where Superman's trying to introduce the Authority, like I said earlier, to the goodness in the world and kind of change the Authority's mind in order to help them be people who actually protect the world instead of destroying the negativity in it. And I think what's also interesting is that the Authority was actually created by Warren Ellis and Brian Hitch for an independent comic book publisher called Wildstorm, and that Wildstorm was actually acquired by DC Comics and was put into the DC continuity in 2011, and how it's kind of similar to James Gunn and Peter Safran wanting to put the Authority characters within the DCU continuity. I think it's really interesting that different characters that are actually part of the Authority. There's Jenny Sparks, who's a British woman who can generate and turn into electricity. There is Jack Hawksmoor, who can cyclically bond with different cities and gain powers from them. There's Swift, who's a Tibetan woman who has wings and talons. There's Apollo, who's like a bioengineered Superman pastiche. There's Midnighter, who's kind of like a bioengineered Batman who possesses the ability to foresee his opponent's moves in combat. There's the Engineer, who had her blood replaced by 9 pints of nanotechnology and uses it to create solid objects with it. And finally, there's the Doctor, who's a Dutch drug addict and shaman who possesses all the powers of the hundreds of shamans who came before him. So I definitely think there's a lot of interesting characters in that lineup, and definitely have some like quirky powers and like some powers that are like actually really powerful and dangerous. So it'd be interesting to see how James Gunn fits them within the DCU continuity. And James Gunn described this as a passion project for him, and that he's been working that line with the other DCU writers for a while, and that it would have several connections with Superman. And there's actually a storyline in the comic books that centers around Superman and the Authorities, where Superman and a former character from the Authority named Manchester Black assemble a new incarnation of the Authority to liberate the planet of Warworld from a character named Mongol. So obviously there's like a relationship there, and I'm sure James Gunn and Peter Safran are going to have like some kind of twist to make it fit within their DCU continuity, but I'm sure there's definitely going to be a relationship there between Superman and the Authority, so it'll be interesting to see what happens with that. But yeah, overall, I'm actually pretty excited about the Authority. Again, I don't know anything about them except for what I've read up on them through research, but yeah, just based on the characters and the abilities and kind of like their personal goals, I think it would be interesting to see how they fit into the DCU and how they're first introduced in Superman and how they can continue the storyline that was set up in that movie in their own film and how they're kind of embraced within the larger DCU. So yeah, overall, I'm really excited to see what happens with it. All right, now move on to The Brave and the Bold. And I'm actually really excited about this one just because Batman is my personal favorite character in the DC comics. So anything Batman related, I'm going to be really excited for. And the fact that James Gunn and Peter Safran are going to be at the helm of this, I think is going to be really, really exciting. And the film is supposed to explore the members of the Bat family, including the introduction of Batman's son, Damian Wayne, who will serve as the new Robin. And James Gunn said that was supposed to be kind of like a strange father and son story between Batman and Robin. So I think that could be really interesting, especially the fact that Damian is kind of like a crazy junior assassin in a way. Because the whole backstory with this character is that he's actually the biological son of Bruce Wayne and Talia al Ghul. And of course, Talia al Ghul is the daughter of Ra's al Ghul, who's the leader of the League of Shadows. And you've seen the Dark Knight trilogy by Christopher Nolan, you'll see how intense those characters are. But then as the story goes on, Damian kind of embraces the fact that he's Bruce Wayne's son and then eventually becomes a new Robin. So obviously there's like a lot of tension at the beginning, but then they learn to evolve and care about each other and kind of become the new dynamic duo in a way. So I think that'd be really cool. And then especially since we're going to be getting more of the Bat family, it'd be interesting to see if we get like Dick Grayson or Jason Todd or Tim Drake and the other former Robins and how they kind of deal with this kind of new Damian Wayne Robin. And then hopefully we'll also get Jim Gordon and like Barbara Gordon, aka Batgirl, in this storyline as well. So we'll see how it goes. I mean, so far we've just gotten confirmed that Batman and Damian Wayne will be in this story. So I think that could be like good on its own. But yeah, we'll see if we get other members of the Bat family within this film as well. And as far as the version of Batman that'll be introduced in this new DCU, James Gunn said that it's going to be based on the Grant Morrison comic book run of Batman from 2006 to 2013. And it could possibly be based on the whole Batman and Son comic book story arc. And in that storyline, we get introduced to the character of Damian Wayne and everything that I said earlier about how Talia al Ghul kind of had this whole mission of bringing Damian Wayne into Batman's life to cause havoc, and obviously Batman growing wise to Talia al Ghul's schemes and fighting against it, and then Damian Wayne kind of rejecting the whole League of Assassins plans for him and then kind of embracing being the son of Batman and then helping him fight crime in Gotham City. So I think that could be a cool premise for a film for sure. Also, it was confirmed that Ben Affleck's version of Batman from the DCEU would not be appearing in this DCU version, which totally makes sense since James Gunn and Peter Safran are pretty much trying to wipe the slate clean of the DCEU and embrace this new DCU with a new iteration of Batman. And it also makes sense because Ben Affleck really wants nothing to do with the DCU anymore, especially after he was treated after Batman and Superman and Justice League and everything like that. So it totally makes sense that they kind of wipe the slate clean from him. Also, that kind of brings up the whole kind of Elseworlds alternate reality for the DCU when it comes to Matt Reeves' Batman and how the Batman doesn't fit within the DCU version. So James Gunn has named everything that's outside of his DCU as Elseworld. So everything with the Batman sequel and with the Penguin series and all those other different series taking place within the Batman universe are part of Elseworlds. And now in the DCU, there's going to be a whole new Batman that James Gunn will be developing, just so that there won't be any confusion with people asking like, okay, why is this Batman here, but this Batman's not part of this continuity and everything. So James Gunn just made the decision to keep it completely separate, just to make it easier for audiences to follow, which totally makes sense. And then in June of 2023, Andy Muschietti was confirmed to be directing the project alongside Barbara Muschietti, who would be serving as producer, as well as James Gunn and Peter Safran. And Andy Muschietti previously directed The Flash, which James Gunn previously said would kind of reset the whole DCEU continuity into the DCU continuity. But then last month, December of 2024, Andy Muschietti said that development on this project was delayed because of his commitments to other projects and to ensure that this project didn't conflict with Matt Reeves' sequel to The Batman, which totally makes sense. But yeah, it's definitely a bummer that we'll have to wait even longer for this movie because I'm definitely really excited for The Brave and the Bold. Like I said before, anything Batman related I'm really excited for. But it's a good thing they didn't have a release date already set, so I don't have to worry about things getting delayed or anything like that. They just have to wait for the movie to be as good as possible and then announce release dates, which I think is definitely the best call for sure. And hopefully that'll mean more attention brought to the Batman sequel to make it as good as possible and to be released on time so that they can finally work on the Brave and the Bold movie and have that be as good as possible before it's released. But overall, I'm really excited for the Brave and the Bold. Hopefully after the Batman sequel is released, more attention can be brought to it and we can kind of get the production going on that again and then get it released as soon as possible, and how this new Batman will fit into this new DCU continuity and how he contributes to the overall DCU. All right, now we move on to Swamp Thing. And like some other projects, this was a character that I wasn't really familiar with until I kind of did more research into the character and the backstory, and yeah, now I'm actually really excited for it. And the official premise is that it's supposed to be kind of like a gothic horror movie that kind of explores the origins of Swamp Thing. And back in December of 2022, James Mangold said that he was actually interested in working on a DC project with James Gunn and Peter Safran. And then in 2023, when James Gunn revealed his slate of the new DC projects, Swamp Thing was one of them. And James Gunn said it would take specific inspiration from Alan Moore's 1984 to 1984 comic book run called The Saga of the Swamp Thing. And that storyline, it talks about the character of Alec Holland, who is a scientist who becomes a Swamp Thing. And actually, after doing more research on it, it was actually a really interesting storyline where he's a scientist in the bayou of Louisiana and he's surrounded by the swamp and he's working on these different experiments, and these criminals actually blow up his lab within the swamp and killing him in a way. And his consciousness kind of seeps into the vines of the swamp and they become kind of like a humanoid creature, and he becomes kind of like the protector of the green, and how he's trying to turn himself back into a human, but then he realizes that it's actually his consciousness that's in the Swamp Thing creature and his human bones were left behind. And then he finally puts the bones to rest and kind of becomes this anti-hero in a way, kind of protecting the swamp and protecting the green from all these different threats. So it's actually a really cool storyline for sure. And then after the announcement in 2023, James Mangold posted a picture of Swamp Thing on social media, and the next day he was confirmed to be in negotiations to write and direct the movie, but he wasn't expected to start work until after he finished Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny and A Complete Unknown, the Bob Dylan biopic. But now that those movies are finally released, he can finally start working on Swamp Thing. But at the same time, he's also working on a Star Wars project, and he said that he was unsure of which one to produce first. So we'll see what he does with that. Hopefully he does Swamp Thing first, because I'm not really sure what the state of Star Wars is going to be in the next few years. So I think working on DCU film is probably a better bet, but we'll see what he decides. And James Gunn also described this as a passion project for James Mangold. So maybe that'll kind of entice him more to do Swamp Thing first and then do the Star Wars project. And despite being tonally darker than the other DCU projects, James Gunn and Peter Safran said that they're intending it to be interconnected with the rest of the DCU continuity. So yeah, overall, I'm really excited for this project. I don't really know too much about Swamp Thing, but doing more research on it, I think he could be a really interesting character, and it'd be interesting to see how they kind of fit him within the rest of the DCU continuity. Pretty sure it won't be right away. I think this film will probably be more self-contained, and then they'll try to find a way to kind of integrate him more as the movies and TV shows go on. But yeah, I'm excited to see what they do with it and how he fits into the larger DCU. All right, now we'll move on to to Paradise Lost. And the official premise for the show is that it's supposed to be a political drama about the scheming and power struggles on the all-female island of Themyscira before Wonder Woman was born. So I think that could be really cool. And the title is similar to Paradise Island Lost, which was a 2001 comic book series by Phil Jimenez and George Perez about the Civil War in Themyscira. But I was doing research on that storyline, and it was really about Princess Diana and her aunt Hippolyta and the conflict that they have on Paradise Island. And since it's supposed to take place before the birth of Princess Diana, it'd be interesting to see the origins of Themyscira and kind of like the premise says, all the political schemings that happen and how we see in the present day DCU. And I guess one of the bummers is that we won't see the continuation of Wonder Woman from Patty Jenkins and Gal Gadot, because back in December of 2022, Patty Jenkins was revealed to no longer be developing a sequel to Wonder Woman and Wonder Woman 1984 because she was told by James Gunn and Peter Safran that that iteration didn't fit within their new continuity of the DCU. And I feel kind of bad for Gal Gadot because I know that she was saying that she and James Gunn and Peter Safran were in meetings to talk about a potential Wonder Woman 3. But then James Gunn and Peter Safran kind of had to quickly confirm that that wasn't happening and that they're developing a new iteration of the Wonder Woman character in Themyscira. So that's a little bit of a bummer, but hopefully with this new series, they'll be able to embrace a new version of the Themyscirans and the Amazonians. And hopefully as this new DCU continuity continues, they'll be able to introduce a new Wonder Woman into the DCU and hopefully have that character just be as loved as the Gal Gadot version from the DCEU, just because Wonder Woman is definitely one of the best movies of the DCU. So that's kind of a shame that we won't get to see her iteration in the new DCU continuity, but I think it's a good idea to kind of have it more like as a prequel series, and then as time goes on, eventually introduce a new Princess Diana and then have her be integrated into the new DCU continuity. And Peter Safran and James Gunn also compared this series to Game of Thrones, which totally makes sense, because that show is all about scheming and manipulation and battling and infighting. It's kind of like a sword and sandals kind of story, so I think that'd be really cool for a premise for a show. So we'll see if it goes for multiple seasons or if it's just like a one and done season, but overall I'm really excited for this show and I think it'd be really cool for sure. And finally we have Booster Gold, and the official premise is that Mike Carter / Booster Gold is a disgraced football player from the 25th century who travels back in time to pose as a superhero who uses basic future technology. And yeah, I'm actually really excited about this show too. Again, like I was saying with other DC characters, I didn't really know too much about Booster Gold, but then I went and did research on it. And yeah, he's actually a really interesting character. And the whole reason for that is because his father pretty much told him to intentionally lose football games in order to help him out on different bets. Eventually, the college that he played for kind of caught on to his different schemes and they kicked him out of the football team. So he was kind of looking around for odd jobs and then finally took a job at the science lab and then kind of got introduced to this robot character to work with who introduced him to all these kind of like different forms of technology. And basically he used that technology, like I said in the premise, to go back in time in order to pose as a superhero while using this technology in order to gain fame and fortune, and kind of became a selfish character in a way. But then as time goes on, he has different personal tragedies, he loses his sister and, he kind of learns to embrace being a responsible hero, eventually joins the Justice League and kind of becomes a valuable member of the DC universe. So I think that'd be cool to kind of see like his kind of early stages of being a superhero, but really just kind of fooling the public into thinking that he has superpowers and creating all this kind of like mischief and mayhem in order to gain all this fame and fortune. So I think that'd be really interesting. And James Gunn and Peter Safran pretty much said this is going to be like an outright comedy for the DCEU, which totally makes sense. I feel like Booster Gold is kind of like a Star-Lord character in a way, which is perfect for James Gunn since he wrote and directed the Guardians of the Galaxy trilogy. So I'm pretty sure he's going to put a lot of that influence in Booster Gold, where he's this kind of like childlike loser in a way, and who's always just trying to like make pop culture references and pretend that he's a hero in some way. And then as time goes on, he actually goes through like actual trials and tribulations and actually kind of matures as a hero, learns to not be selfish, learns to actually kind of care about other people, and then maybe eventually join Superman and Batman and all these different characters and become an actual hero within the DCU. So I think that could be really cool for sure. And we already know that James Gunn has a lot of comedy chops, especially his characters in The Suicide Squad and Peacemaker and all those other projects and stuff like that. So it's going to be funny, it's going to be emotional, it's going to be action packed. So yeah, I'm really excited for this series, and we don't really have any confirmation of like when it's going to come out, but yeah, I'm sure as time goes on we'll get more announcements, like casting announcements and like when they're filming and then in post-productions and things like that. So yeah, I'm really excited for this show and can't wait to see what happens with it. All right, I guess I'll sort of wrap up this video. I've been talking way longer than I thought I would be, but yeah, I'm just really excited about this new DCU. When they first announced that it was going to be happening, like I was actually really excited just because the DCEU was pretty disappointing. I mean, there was a couple movies here and there that were pretty good, but overall it just wasn't really the tone that I was really wanting for the DC universe. So the fact that James Gunn and Peter Safran are coming in and kind of wiping the slate slate clean of the DCEU and creating this new DCU continuity, I think is a really good call for sure. And, love James Gunn ever since the first Guardians of the Galaxy movie. I kind of went back and saw his other movies previously. I like Slither. I haven't seen Super, but I definitely will check it out soon. I know that's kind of like a cult classic, so I'll definitely check that out for sure. But yeah, I love the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. And then, when he left Marvel to go to DC and did The Suicide Squad, I really love that movie. He just has a really good job in embracing all the weirdo characters and these really obscure characters from these different comic books and having an audience fall in love with them. And, he did it with Guardians of the Galaxy. Like, no one knew who those characters were. And then, now everyone loves Star-Lord and Gamora and Drax and Rocket and Groot. So I'm pretty sure he'll do that with all these different DCU movies coming. Obviously he'll have like the heavy hitters, Superman, Batman, all them, but he'll have all these kind of obscure characters, like Swamp Thing, Clayface, The Authority, all these characters that I personally don't really know too much about, but I know like the hardcore comic book fans really know about. So it's cool that we're kind of getting a good balance of characters that people already know and love, and then characters that people don't really know at all, and then have James Gunn embrace them and bring them to the mainstream. So I'm definitely really excited for the new DCU. Creature Commandos is pretty good. Peacemaker is really, really cool too. And of course, like, I'm super excited for Superman, especially after that trailer. And then we'll see how the other movies and TV shows do in the future. But yeah, so far I'm really positive about the new DCU, and I think James Gunn and Peter Safran are going to do a really good job. And we'll see how the movies and TV shows do once they come out. But so far they're doing pretty good. So I think they have a good plan in place. They're embracing the fact that they want to have the scripts as good as possible before going into production, and they don't have release dates set in stone, before even writing a script, which, a couple other studios have done and it hasn't really had the best results. So I think these two guys are definitely going to approach the new DCU with like a lot of love, a lot of care, a lot of intelligence behind it, and yeah, make something great. So yeah, overall, you've already heard me say it before, but yeah, I'm really excited for this and can't wait to see what happens. So yeah, thank you so much for watching this video. What movie or TV show from the new DCU continuity are you looking forward to? Be sure to let me know in the comments below. Make sure you give this video a like and subscribe for more videos, and I'll see you next time. Bye.